That's a take. What? What? No! Stop! Okay, that's better. Because I can see that you go through life athwarted. You see the flow of events. You are able to tell how you could most easily fit into it, but you dare to oppose it. And why? Simply because you look at it and say, this fate does not suit me. I will not allow it to befall me. I have always admired people who can do that. So few do. Many, of course, will rant and rave against the garment fate has woven for them, but they pick it up and don it all the same, and most wear it to the end of their days. You would rather go naked into the storm. He could smell the stench of their entrapment and hear their cries. Perhaps he was the one who was truly mad, for a key hung at his belt, and he did nothing. Half the evil in this world occurs while decent people stand by and do nothing wrong. It's not enough to refrain from evil Trell. People have to attempt to do right, even if they believe they cannot succeed. Even when it's stupid to try, especially then. That's how it's done, Trell. You break your heart against this stony world. You fling yourself at it on the side of good, and you do not ask the cost. That's how you do it. It also wasn't you that jumped in to save him. That shows that you have learned nothing. Nothing. You still believe that the evil that befalls another is nothing to you. Let another man be taken slave. Let another town be raided. Let someone else be slaughtered on the beach right in front of you. It won't matter to you until it's your own throat being slit, and we haven't time to wait for that. Life is not a race to restore a past situation, nor does one have to hurry to meet the future. Seeing how things change are what makes life interesting. Danger cups us under its hand, and we can do nothing but stand witness to the turning of the world. Here we walk on the balancing line between futures. Humanity always believes it decides the fate of the whole world, and so it does, but never in the moment that it thinks it does. The future of thousands ripples like a serpent through the water, and the destiny of a ship becomes the destination of the world. If I see anyone in the comment section advocating skipping Liveship, I will send a glowing bald assassin after you. Also, don't skip Farseer. Don't skip Liveship. Don't skip 2 Liveship. Just don't skip Robin Hobb books. If you start them, don't like them, and DNF them, that's fine. Just don't assume you won't like books because they don't have fits or because they do have fits. Anyway, let's get into the review. So I kind of already have a summary in my Ship of Magic review, so I don't feel like just repeating myself because this video is already going to be too long. So we are going to move in straight into the reading experience for the Liveship Traders, which was pretty much all positive because it became my favorite series ever. But the first thing to expect is, let's talk about how it reads in terms of like emotions I felt, and there was quite a lot of pain. Robin Hobb is a brutal author in terms of your emotions, but it wasn't just there for the sake of being there. It was that Robin Hobb is not afraid to have lasting consequences for her characters and totally break the status quo. Lots of series will kind of always revert to the status quo, and the changes you get in people's life aren't going to be everlasting, and you kind of know in the long run normalcy will be restored. That is not true in a Hobb book. You never know whether the status quo is safe, and it's one thing that really allows her to have more emotional moments, is that you actually know that these changes to someone's life that seems drastic may be permanent. Anyway, the other thing I will say is that one of the reasons her books are so emotional. It doesn't have to do with that, like, she's more brutal. She's just better at being brutal, because no one writes human emotions like Robin Hobb that I have read. Like, there's always the advice of for emotions, show and don't tell. Like, you don't say, this character felt rage. You describe, like, the physical impact of feeling rage. And Robin Hobb doesn't just do that. It's like, it's always personalized and to the situation. So you just feel the emotions that the characters feel. Like, that's what I was saying through Ship of Magic. I was like, I feel all the emotions that the characters feel on this page, which was why it was so ridiculously good. And also, because of the combination of how often things go badly and how much pain there is, and how good Hobb is at writing, the triumphant moments hit so much harder. There are scenes that are, like, straight up fist pump worthy that I don't think any other authors would even get a reaction out of, just because Hobb's better at writing than they are. It's just how it is sometimes. I also do want to say, for a content warning, there is sexual assault in these books. There's multiple cases, most of which fade to black, and there's one that, if you don't want to read about that, could really ruin one of the books for you. I will say, so I've recently read Malazan and this, and they both kind of explore the impacts that sexual assault can have on someone. I think Hobb did it way better. Sorry, Erickson fans. I think Hobb did it much, much better. Like, not even close, in all honesty. It's there, like, Hobb does not shy away from uncomfortable situations, and all the reactions to it, whether they be, are always feel so real, that it just, like, I want to warn everyone that it's there, but I also want to say it's incredibly well done. Yeah, that's basically what I got for it. But I think it's definitely something people try and avoid, so I do want to say right off the bat, that is in these books. So if you just don't want to read about people dealing with sexual assault and rape, you're gonna... then I guess you can skip Liveship. But I'm not happy about that. I do want to emphasize, like, it's really well done. It's the best I've ever seen it handled, ever, by far. Not even close. But it's worth mentioning. And now let's talk about the actual writing style. We're going to move on, because that's pretty important to what it's like to read a book. And I'm going to come on this more for prose, but I do not find Hobb, in terms of reading ability, to be a difficult read at all. Like, I think if you're new to fantasy, or in general you read pretty slow, I would not worry about reading these books. Hobb's writing style is just, it's so perfect at communicating what she wants to communicate, that even though, like, it's what some would be considered flowery, and Hobb uses a pretty good vocabulary, she's just so good at getting you to picture things in her head, and the sentences flow from sentence to sentence. I don't know how Hobb does this, but she somehow manages to combine, like, the gravitas and beauty of, like, Tolkien prose with, like, the digestibility and readability that's more popular among modern fantasy, which is why she's my favorite prose writer, and trending towards just my favorite author. Also, something to mention, these are slow, not action-packed books. Now, in the Farseer trilogy, I thought there were parts where the pacing was not just slow, but, like, bad, like janky, and parts where there was weird progress, and where some sections went by, like, super fast, and then there was something that was, like, super slow, and it was really weird. These, I think, even though they're similar in speed, are much better examples of really, really good slow pacing, where it always feels like you're making progress, like you're never just pointless, but also events are just moving slowly because the focus is the character relationships, which is what Hobb is just incredibly good at writing. And so even though they were a slow-paced book, They actually, like, they maintain tension super well, especially book 1, which is kind of like one of the most edge-of-my-seat books I've ever been on, because you're just constantly worried that things are going to go completely wrong. Because, I mean, sometimes they do go completely wrong, but the level of tension is really extraordinary. But it is worth warning that if you don't want to read a slow-paced book, like right now, then you should wait until you're in the mood to read something slow-paced. Same thing goes with action. I think there are 6 action scenes in this book, probably a total of about 3 pages of action, of like people trying to hit each other with swords. Don't expect action in these books. It's not what it's about. It's about relationships between people and contests of wills and minds. I think that kind of covers up the reading experience. So it's gonna be similar to Malazan. We're gonna go characters, everything else, and then this time it isn't going to be issues I have with it, because I basically have none. It's going to be issues I could see other people having with it. Let's get into it. So, this is, in terms of characterization, the best series I've ever read. Just straight up. Every single character in this series feels so human. There is not a single character who is just there. Like, legitimately, if I do a top 10 character list, which I'm going to do later in the year, I am now pigeonholed into saying 1 per series, or it'd probably be like 7 characters from this series. And I'm sure by the end of Realm of the Elderlings, it'd probably be like 9 by Robin Hobb, and I can't do that. Also, their character development is so incredible and feels so believable. Like, it doesn't rely on like sudden changes that come out of nowhere. They just believably evolve over time as the way they see the world based on their experiences and who they are as a person changes. It's incredible. And you also can't talk about characters without talking about relationships between the characters, and I think as far ahead as Robin Hobb is at writing characters from everyone else, she's even farther ahead at relationships. And it's not even like the normal relationships that you expect to see that stand out the most. It's like the unique relationships that there's no way Hobb has any like personal experience to go off of. Like, if you're writing between like a character and their best friend, you can pull experience from your own best friend, but you can't pull experience for a character and the somewhat crazy sentient boat that they have a relationship with. And yet, despite that, not only are all those relationships vivid and unique, they're completely believable. Like, this is the type of thing you wouldn't even notice if it was wrong, probably, but you can just tell that not only are the like unique relationships good, like well written, they're perfect. Like, the dialogue, that is how people would talk to each other if you had these 2 people in that unique relationship. I don't know how I know, but I read it and I can tell it's true. It's incredible. There's some of these that are similar in the Farseer trilogy. This was my biggest praise for the Farseer trilogy, and it comes out just as strong in Liveship or stronger. Also, I do want to talk about, she's also masterful at character voice, both in dialogue and in like inner monologue. I'd put her, I've always said Abercrombie is the GOAT at voice. I'd put Robin Hobb like 1A, 1B, maybe slightly behind Abercrombie in terms of voice, but better than everyone else I've read in terms of making the voices feel real and distinct and unique and vivid. It's incredible. There's a really good combination in this series of kind of people you can root for, who no one is accusing of being Mary or Gary Stews, but they're good guys. And the best morally gray character I've ever read in Kenneth. Kenneth's such an interesting and complex character. And he's probably not even in like my top 3 favorite characters in the series, but he's my favorite morally gray character ever, beating out Sandan Glokta and Jaime Lannister and Mr. Zeth Zunsun Volano, Truthless of Shinorar. They've all been passed. Kenneth is now my favorite morally gray character. Man, he's an asshole, but he's so interesting. And and so real, and he doesn't quite get other people's, like, doesn't quite get humanity, but is so interesting. Now, I don't have anything bad to say about the characterization. It's as close to perfect as I've ever read. I guess I should mention the characters do stupid things, but they're never stupid to advance the plot. Like, I feel like you can kind of tell when you're reading when a character does a stupid thing, whether it was an author got to a point and was like, for the plot to work, this character has to go do that. Well, I guess I'll do it. It makes no sense, but they need to be there. And when an author gets to a situation and it's like, wow, the outline says that they should do the smart thing, but this character wouldn't do the smart thing. They would mess it up, and so the character does mess it up because that's who they are. That's what this is, 100% of the time. There are no characters doing dumb things just because Robin Hobb needed them to do the dumb things to advance the plot. It's the characters are people, and so it's like Robin Hobb knows what decision those people would make in that situation, so she has them make the decision they would make, and then she kind of has to get the plot to work, and somehow does it, like, perfectly. So anyways, that's characterization. If you are a character-driven reader, read this series, damn it. It's the best I've ever read for characters, and, like, the depth of the human, like, the characters' emotions is incredible. How fast you get to know the characters, it's incredible. It's also worth mentioning that this series has some of the most hateable villains you've ever read, and it's partially because of how human they feel, and that they aren't just, like, there to be a foil to our protagonists that we want to win. They're there for their own gains, and fuck Kyle. Man, Kyle sucks. I talked about it in my Ship of Magic review, but Kyle sucks. And the fact that, like, he still feels like a person, like, he's objectively not the worst person in the series, or that I've read, but I hate him the most because of how well he's written. So, the first thing to talk about for Liveship for the everything else section is the plotting, which is where I think one of the aspects I think Liveship is vastly superior to Farseer. Robin Hobb is very, very good at having events in one part of, like, the world or the setting affect like, people in other locations in a very natural way. I think the pacing is much, much better in this book. It doesn't have, like, times where a character spends an entire chapter describing something seemingly unimportant and then gloss over super important details. I think it's much better in terms of setup and payoff. I thought, like, at the end of Farseer, this isn't a spoiler, don't worry. At the end of Farseer, I found it, like, emotionally the ending worked, but, like, there's no way, there's some of, like, the plot twist and the reveal that I kind of thought, and I was like, what, there's no way, like, I could have predicted that. And I think this book and series had a lot more of, like, there's a reveal, and you kind of get, like, the light bulb goes off in your head, where you realize, like, holy crap, it was like that all along. How didn't I see this? But then I actually didn't, because it was really well hidden. So setup and payoff, I thought, was on another level compared to Farseer, and it's just gone from below average to way above average. I do have to once again mention that these books are slow. Do not expect fast pacing. Now, that being said, the amount of tension that was maintained actually made these much faster reads than Farseer. And so this makes no sense, but Ship of Magic, book 1, is like a slow, character-driven page-turner? Whatever. That it managed to be, like, where I had to keep knowing what was happening despite events going really slow. So, plotting-wise, I think it goes from being a weakness in Farseer to a strength in Liveship. One complaint I had for Farseer is I thought maybe the story might not make sense from if you told it from the point of view of one of the villains, where it's like their success felt unearned. And that's just not true here. I didn't have that issue with this, which I think was maybe partially due to, like, the added point of views. I actually just think, in general, Robin Hobb's writing, plotting, and character all shined more with multiple point of views, because we could see how multiple people saw the world and how events are impacting multiple people. But overall, I'd give it a super high score for plotting, and plotting isn't what would be considered like a main strength of Robin Hobb. Usually when you hear like people sell Robin Hobb, it's her characters and her prose and her dialogue. But I mean, I thought the plotting for this really holds up well against pretty much any series I can think of. And for prose, I think prose is one of the, I don't think is like, I didn't notice a huge step up from Assassin's Quest, but I also read Assassin's Quest a while ago. But Robin Hobb is my favorite prose writer in general. If you've watched my videos, you know I say for about 90% of authors are kind of in the range of prose where it isn't good enough to have a significant impact on my enjoyment, but it also isn't bad enough to have a significant impact on my enjoyment. Robin Hobb is one of the few authors who get outside that to it significantly affects my enjoyment because of how good it is. It's so elegant and well thought out, and it's almost jarring when you switch from something else to Robin Hobb, or from Robin Hobb to something else, like how much harder it is to like picture what's going on, or how reading Robin Hobb is just so much smoother. And also just like in terms of as a descriptive writer, gorgeous writing in general. Its prose is like a 10 out of 10, 100%. I couldn't give this series a higher score. Same with character. Plotting, there's some series that I think are better for plotting. It's just very above average. But prose, I mean, I almost can't think of someone who wouldn't like Robin Hobb's prose. Like, if you like super flowery writing, I think you'll like Robin Hobb's prose. And if you like really simple writing, you'll like Robin Hobb's prose. Like, for me, it's the ultimate example of knowing when it's like beauty and simplicity is important. For prose, there's a quote by like Albert Einstein, which is, "Genius is taking the complex and making it simple." And that's what Robin Hobb does when it's necessary, and then in combination is just as good at when she needs to have like fancy flowery prose, at being better at it than basically anyone else I've read. So at this point, she's my favorite prose writer. I am reading Tigana probably in April, so maybe May probably. So we'll see if that changes. But as of now, I can't give a higher score for prose. I'm about to sound like a broken record, but I thought the world building was also a significant step up from Farseer, and goes from a relative weakness in Farseer to a relative strength in Liveship. I wouldn't give Liveship like a 10 out of 10 for world building. Like, I wouldn't put it in S tier with like Wheel of Time and Malazan, but it'd be kind of one step down. Farseer, one of my kind of complaints for it is a lot of the time spent in a castle. You could replace that with any castle or any setting, and it doesn't really change the story. I thought the utilization of this setting, of the area around Bingtown, was vastly superior to anything that was in the Farseer trilogy. A lot of like the mysteries of the world and reveals also I thought were way better planned out in terms of setup and payoff. I thought the display of like different cultures was also better. Really, I think world building across the board is a big step up from Farseer, which didn't have bad world building, but I thought it just had like okay world building, and then Liveship jumps up to very good. So yeah, I know I sound like a broken record, but again, I mean, this isn't one that's a perfect score, but I'd give it a pretty damn high score on world building. And for the Malazan review, this section was action, but this series has like 4 pages of action combined, so that doesn't make sense to have a section. Funnily enough, though, the action is really good when it's there. But I do want to talk about the themes here, because I think, broken record time, thematically, I think Liveship is much better than Farseer. I think the main kind of themes it tackles, it's not quite as expansive in terms of the amount of themes it tackles as something like Malazan, but the themes it tackles, it just does such a damn good job. And for me, the 4 main themes that really stuck with me from reading this was complacency was the biggest one. Complacency in the face of evils, which I think there's some really incredible insight on human nature here. And that the kind of evils of humanity mostly don't persist because everyone is bad. It's because people who are pretty good or decent don't actively try and counter the evils of the world, which I think is probably a more accurate and like useful conclusion for most people than just evil being bad in general. The vast majority of humans manage to not be evil, but most people are complacent because not being complacent is really hard. The other one that was also a pretty big theme in Farseer was individual agency, that individuals can have a large impact on the world. Also, it might not be pleasant to have a large impact on the world, and it's not necessarily the things that you think that have the large impact that do, but that continues to be a key theme in Liveship and continues to be extremely well done. I also love the stuff about I want to say about the status quo or change, kind of the false dichotomy people put themselves in between a change someone else wants that you don't like and staying how you are, when really the status quo is one of infinite options, not one of two options. And then the last one that's hit home pretty brutally is cycles of abuse, which, yeah, especially this one gets hit home hard, and all of them I thought were brilliantly well realized, and brilliantly explored. I think Hobb has just very deep insight on human nature. That's kind of me done for the characters and everything except characters section, so I am going to try and say reasons why you may not like this series. I'm going to try. I can't promise I'll succeed, but I'm going to try. Also, for these themes, especially the way the end ties into them, this isn't going to be spoilers. If you're a booktuber and you're watching this and you want to do a collab about Liveship, please let me know, because I would love to do a spoiler talk about Liveship. That would be great. Alright, now I have to try to come up with flaws. I think the most likely reason to be unhappy with this series is probably related to the content warning I mentioned before, which I think I should just be more clear about what I'm talking about. There is a rape scene from the point of view of the person being raped. It's not described graphically, but like the emotions going on in that person's head are very vivid and pretty horrific to read. And then the aftermath of how shittily it's handled by others is pretty uncomfortable to read, which I think is exactly what it's supposed to be. But yeah, I think Robin Hobb got the reaction she was going for. But I could totally see someone just not wanting to read about that. And just saying and just having that kill their enjoyment of book 3. That being said, it's hard not to recommend a series based on one chapter. So, I mean, if you want, you can DM me. I can tell you what chapter it is, and you can skip that one. But I could absolutely see that really killing someone's enjoyment of Ship of Destiny. And then I guess really the only other thing I can think of is characters being irrational at times, which I thought was just good character writing, but I guess, I don't know, I'm reaching here. This series is basically perfect for me. My least favorite book was The Madship, which is like my 7th favorite book ever, and I gave 9.7 out of 10, so, I don't know. It's hard for me to find flaws. I don't know. That's all I got. Maybe characters being irrational and a content warning. And I mean, just if you want action or slow pacing, but it's not a flaw. That's just what type of book it is. I don't know. So we're going to go into the wrap up right away. Let's get my final thoughts. So, I mean, my final thoughts is basically, I didn't think Stormlight would ever not be my favorite series, but here we are. It's my favorite series ever. I literally could not be more positive. Off the charts characterization, best prose I've ever read, off the charts dialogue, fantastic plotting, fantastic world building, amazing themes, incredible building of tension. It's a masterpiece. It's the best trilogy it's the best any form of series I've ever read. I think now when I see people skipping Liveship, it will actually cause me physical pain. don't skip Farseer to get to Liveship. Farseer's also very good, and also then you can't read Tawny Man, so you'll miss out on Hobb's writing. Just read all the books in Realm of the Elderlings. I didn't absolutely love Farseer, like I really liked Farseer, but Liveship blew it out of the water. It blew every series out of the water, and it contains 3 of the best books I've ever read.